Hello, everybody. We're going to get started. This workshop is about indexing your site with Redis, RediSearch, and an open source tool that we made to index our documentation. So that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to walk through, how this code works that we wrote and open sourced to do this on our documentation site. We'll get it started. We'll get it loaded, and then we're going to index a random person's blog, just to show you that you can actually index your own site with this thing. And then we'll talk about that. So so I'll do a quick PowerPoint just to sort of introduce this project and me and what we're going to talk about. And then I'll switch over to code, and we'll spend most of the time just working with this project and actually getting a site indexed. All right, so let's do some PowerPoint. It's going to be exciting. All right, here's the official start of the talk. So this is, or workshop, actually. It's a workshop because if you have a laptop with you, which you probably do, you should be able to do some of this stuff on your own computer, and you'll get time to do that. So this is indexing your site with Redis using RediSearch. And I am going to show you all the pieces right now, just all the pieces of the workshop. As an overview, we're going to have the introduction, then we're going to index a random person's blog. Happens to be me, andrewbrookins.com. We're going to index my blog just so that we all have the same problems if you're following along, and we can address them together. Then I encourage you to do the exact same thing you did in this workshop for your own site afterward. All right, so after we index the site, we're going to test out searching it and see if that worked. And if it didn't work, then I will cry in the corner and play some music or something. Then we're going to set up a front end for the search, right? So I'll show you what all this looks like in a moment, but there's an actual JavaScript HTML front end component that we have we also created for our documentation search, and you can use that separately and sort of use it to test out the search API. You can also just download it. It's open source. You can download it and use it for your own setup. Then we'll have some Q&A. If we have time, it's not an overview. If we have time, I'll talk about deployment options and sort of how we deploy this, how other ways we've deployed it. I've tested out different deployment strategies, so we can talk about that if we have time. All right, so it's a 2-hour workshop. It starts at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, ends at 11. So let's go. So the introduction about me. I'm Andrew Brookins. I'm a developer advocate at Redis Labs. I live in Oregon in the United States. It's morning where I'm at. And that's all in here. I'm a doting father. Some say I'm a doting father. To these folks. This picture is taken before the pandemic, and now I am 25 years older. I think a lot about Redis Cloud and Redis. Okay, so the actual technology, though, that we're going to talk about is mostly RediSearch. RediSearch is the querying, indexing, and full-text search engine for Redis. It's a source-available Redis module, practically speaking, that you can install in your Redis server or run on our cloud product, Redis Cloud. So another piece that we'll look at, and really where we're going to spend most of our time, is the open source project redis-sitesearch. This is an application, it's a Python application that, quote unquote, we built for our documentation site. So there's the repository. It's real. You can actually go to it and download the things that we're going to look at today and run them. Where were we though? Okay. So this is ideal for indexing and querying documentation sites. And why is that? It's really because that's what we built it for. So it's, we'll see why that is, little pieces of that, but it has a lot of pieces built into it that are built for sites that have a hierarchy, like a documentation site. So that means that, there's sections of the site and, yada, yada, yada. So we'll see why it is practically soon. However, despite being written for documentation, you can use it to index your sites. So you can download it. It's really not that hard to set this up for an expert such as myself who actually built it. But and for you, it's doable. And then you can extend it to index your site, whatever that is. So I was like, I need to have some kind of visual. So I sent off my requirements to our design team, and this is what they came back to me with. Just kidding. I actually did this last night. So so here's the major pieces of this project. And in any kind of search project in general, the pieces are similar, right? So there's usually an indexing component. Indexing is a process of taking a source data and adding it to a search engine. So our indexer is also a scraper because we are actually scraping a live website and then adding the sites, adding all the data about the site into Redis, right? So the indexer scrapes websites and ingests that data into Redis. Then the other piece, you can see here, RediSearch in my excellent handwriting here, you can see RediSearch runs alongside Redis as a module. So it runs in the process, in the server process. And what it does is it's constantly watching a set of hashes in Redis. The hashes are, whoops, oh my gosh. This is a tragedy. Okay. The hashes are, okay, let me take a step back. So when we index data from websites, we put them into hashes in Redis, right? And then the RediSearch process is following those hashes in the background and adding them to a search index. It's much more than a search index. We are going to use it for full text search. It can do a lot more, but that's practically speaking what's happening here. So the search index is down here in RediSearch. Then there's a search API that runs, outside. This is like these are Python processes that run. You would in real production, you can scale this part up so that you have 20 app processes running that are handling web requests, and then they are querying RediSearch. That's how the data flow is. The data travels from RediSearch to the search API. It queries RediSearch for documents. When somebody actually goes to use your search form, that's what happens. Okay, so you probably already know this, or if you've ever used anything like search, it's a similar setup. But this particular setup is Redis. It's all in memory and it's very fast. So that's all I have for slides. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on slides. The next slide we'll see is we'll have like hands-on slides. When we get to the next hands-on piece, we'll do it. We'll have this slide up so that you know exactly what to do. But first, we're going to write some code. So let's do it. I'm going to switch to my editor and go to the backend project here. Let me just take a look at this outline. I'll be referring to this outline throughout the rest of this talk, not the slides mostly. But the outline is here to help me make sure I've got everything that I needed to talk about, or I wanted to talk about anyway. So we heard about this. We heard about all this. There's an API. There's a front end. Oh yeah. Let's look at this. Let's look at what what the whole point is, right? So this is our documentation site. This is the live version of what we're looking at today. So you go to this documentation site and you search, and you instantly get results. And then this speaks to the quote unquote, this works really well for documentation. So these are areas of our site, Redis Enterprise software. It's like a top level area of the site. Redis modules is a top level area, and then there's pages within that section. So this front end component and the back end component are aware of the hierarchy of pages in the search index, and we'll present that visually to you. So this is what we're building today. We're gonna make it do this, but for a random guy's website. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, we looked at that. We know what RediSearch are. Talked about the project. Talked about there's a front end project. If you're following along and if you want to set this up yourself, you need a few things on your computer. So you need Git, Python above 3.8. Node.js above 15 and Docker above 20. I think I actually used 19 when I was setting this up, but I recommend 20. Okay, so now is the first hands-on. If you want to try this, you are welcome to do that now. You can watch me do it, and we'll see what happens. So I'm going to do it first, and then I'll switch and leave this slide open that tells you the commands to run. Okay, let's see if I can break this. Really, it's best if we can make this actually break, right? So what I'm going to do is just remove this directory I had, my temp folder. I'm going to my temp folder, And I'm going to clone. Here's what I'll do. I'm going to copy and paste directly from the PowerPoint slide that you're going to use if you're doing this hands-on. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that for some reason. Okay, that's fine. This is the command I'm going to type. I'm going to do a git clone. It'll be in my history. Okay. So I'm going to run git clone. I'm going to clone this into just a completely new directory. And go in it. Here's the project. This is like I cloned it, right? If you read the README, this part is in the README. I guess I didn't put it on the slide, so pay attention here. I'm going to zoom in. This is important. Okay. So we configure this app with environment variables, and it ships with an example file that should be fine for running the tests and running it in development. So you want to copy that file from .m.example to .env, and you can see it's this is all. None of this really matters, for our purposes, except for like something like this, right? So this app runs, the tests run, the local development environment all run inside of Docker, and these values here reflect that. So these environment variables are for your Docker setup. All right, so you just copy the file, and then let's zoom out again, the important part. Let's see if it, okay, wait. I use these aliases. I'm deeply embedded in my aliases, so you might see me use commands like G and DC. These are all Docker Compose and Git commands. So I'm going to bring up the test container. That will bring up the Redis container, and it should run tests. So let's see what happens. Now, you poor souls don't have all the Docker layers cached locally, so this actually could take you quite a while to bring up some of these containers, and that's okay. Okay, so the test ran and passed. So I'm going to bring up the entire application. You can see there's a worker process, worker container. There's an app container. There is a, what is there? There's a scheduler container. Yeah. What? I wonder if this is any better. I'm seeing an error in my output, so let's really quickly just fix that. Let's see. It's actually fixed. There's like this is deep inside of this thing that you wouldn't really want to know this, but it has to do with these working directories and the configuration for this. These containers use Supervisor D. Supervisor D is a cool project that will keep processes running, and you don't always need this for like Docker containers, but I'm using it because why you don't always need it for Docker containers is it's really useful for keeping multiple processes up, especially. So these Docker containers sometimes do run multiple processes. Anyway, the error, you probably couldn't see it. It's about, let me get this thing out of the way. Okay, it's about our setup for Supervisor D, which I probably changed while I was messing with this. Let me make sure I've pushed up all of the latest stuff here. Whoops. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, let me just bring this up from this other directory, and I will look into that momentarily. Okay. So I switched back to this other directory. I had cloned into a new directory. I'm not sure why I was getting that, but I'll look into that. In the meantime, let's run through from this successful, this incredibly successful moment here. So going back to, this hands-on moment. We're doing a Docker Compose up and bringing the application up, and that's what I'm running through right now. I added a bunch of data into the database last night, so let me just we are going to get this app running today, or I am going to die. Only one of these things can happen. Okay, so what I did, I cleared out the database state saved from my testing last night and brought this app up, and it should be running now, looks like. Okay, so let's go back to the slide. You should be able to see my slide. It's the hands-on number 1. Let's see if you can do this, or if you get the same error I was running into, and then I'll switch over to Q&A or chat, wherever you want to ask your questions. If you want to try to run this command, you're going to do git clone. Remember to, you know what? Hey, I can edit this slide. It's my slide. I'm going to edit this slide to have that extra command that you need. So if anybody actually tries this, let me know. Go back. Let me know, and let me know if you get any errors. It should work. Meanwhile, I'm going to switch my code over. We'll get back. I'll get that back to you so you can see that slide in just a sec. I want to switch this over off screen so that I can work on it some more and try to understand that what was going on there. And for most people, if you actually did try this, you might be about 10% of the way through downloading all the Docker layers for Docker to actually start the container, which we can't really do anything about that. So you just keep working, follow along, and then you can watch the recording later if you're having that problem at all, or you can just ask me questions later on Discord. I'm on Discord. We'll talk about Discord in a minute. Okay, yeah. So I guess I just had some cached Docker containers or something, because I cleared out my Docker stuff and restarted from this fresh checkout, and it worked just fine. So, Docker. I don't know. What can I say? Okay, let's get back to some coding stuff. We're going to end the first hands-on portion now, and I'm going to, let's see, where were we at? Let's go back to the checklist. My entire life is checklists because I can't get anything done without them. So let's find that checklist. Where was that? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, we probably did clone this. I cloned it. It worked a couple times after I did the first one. So let's move on. I at least have an environment that we can use to index. You might or might not, but eventually I believe you will. And I can help you personally afterward in our Discord chat if you want to carry it through to the end. So the next thing that we're going to work on is we're going to index that random blog I was talking about. I did pull this name out of a bag, and it happens to be my name. So we're going to index this blog. So we'll see how that works. So these are at a high level here. Let's see. We're going to talk about an important piece of this app called the site configuration. There's one of these per sites that you index. We're going to run the indexing job to actually do the index, and that'll scrape my site and add it to the search index. And then you'll get a chance to try that and see if you can get your Docker set up to actually index this blog. After we do all this, we'll test it out. But first, let's see if we can even get something indexed. That's that's important. So, all right, let's do some coding here. We want to be in the backend app. That's redis-sitesearch. And I'm going to go to, let's see, sometimes it helps to see, some people, sometimes it helps to see like the tree of files, right? So let me open that up. Okay, well, there's a lot of files, obviously. This is a, medium size or small, depending on where where you work, Python project. And lots of different stuff in here, but the main Python package is sitesearch. And it has lots of pieces. It has an API we'll look at. It has commands you can run, and yada, yada, yada. Then there's a bunch of this, all of these necessary files for a project like this, but we're going to be mostly working in the Python package. site search. Okay, so we're talking about indexing, right? So let's kind of here's what we'll do. We're gonna follow from the farthest we can go outside and drill into the inner pieces. Okay, so what I mean is let's look at how indexing starts to happen. So there's a couple ways, but the main way is this scheduler process that runs inside of its own container. This is like you could think of like a scheduler as like cron. That's basically what we use this thing for. A lot of these, our indexing tasks happen in the background, and they're stored in Redis, and we use the Python library, not Django RQ, Python RQ. It's just RQ. Most people just call it RQ. It uses Redis as a queue. So what happens is this scheduler process runs, and when it starts up, it adds a recurring task every 60 minutes to do indexing. And it actually adds it configures one of these tasks to run every 60 minutes per site that we've told this application that we want to index. So here's the for loop that runs over all the configured sites. And then immediately when we start up, we start indexing. That's just useful, when we actually deploy this app. We deploy a totally fresh version every time. So it indexes from scratch every time we deploy it. You don't necessarily have to do that. But that's the way that we got started with this. So that happens, and various other things happen here that we don't need to worry about. But the important thing for a project like this is this recurring task. This doesn't ship with Python RQ, the Redis queue library, and you have to get this separate scheduler library, but it works pretty well. But this is the outside, right? This is the outside. So a scheduler creates this configuration to run every 60 minutes and do indexing, and also indexing happens right away, more or less. We enqueue a job right away to do indexing, and the actual job we enqueue is right in here. It's the index job. Let's jump over to that. I'm going to use the go to definition tool that's common in every editor, and go to the actual index function. So this is a task, an RQ task that starts what's called the indexer, which is just a Python object that controls a lot of the scraping, that happens that goes on behind the scenes. So when you don't see this, but there's a worker process, right, that pulls these jobs, just like in every async task setup. This scheduler just creates jobs, and then there's a worker that pulls these. This is what it runs when it pulls a job. It runs this index task, right? And so once again, we're going to go deeper. So the indexer is this thing that actually does the indexing. These two lines are when the indexing really happens. And, some stuff gets set up in the init method for this indexing class, this indexer class. So you can see here, we set up a bunch of stuff. This is related to, where in RediSearch, we actually store the hashes for the site data. So we have one, you may or may not picked up on this, but this runs once for every site. So when we run indexer, it's for a single site, right? And so when we first set up the class, we need to set up the index we're going to use for that, and things like that, right? And if it doesn't exist, we need to create it, and yada yada yada, right? So, but the real meat here is in the index method, and that's where we create a scrapey spider. Scrapey is a really popular Python library for doing web scraping, and that's what the indexer uses to scrape sites. So we create a spider. This is some Python. This is some meta magic here. This actually creates a spider class. Yada yada yada. It's not important to know exactly what's going on here, but in effect, we spider a site, right? Okay. So the rest of this, not that big file, but not that small either, is about parsing stuff out of each URL, and then creating a hierarchy and things of that nature. So this is kind of this is the lower end of the, you know, in our abstraction pie, we've reached the lower crust, right? So our whole point of looking at this is we want to add a new site. Okay, so I think we've gotten deep enough, and we can start to look at what controls the sites that this code actually indexes. And if we go back to our init method, you can see that when we create one of these indexer instances, we get a site configuration object. And this, I'm going to jump to this code again. This is a data class, a Python data class. If you're not that familiar with Python, you can think of these as, you know, just plain Python objects that have a little bit of magic to help with, you know, not having to write an init method to set all these different instance variables. So you know, when you look at this, but, you know, taking a step back from Python, what you're looking at, right? This is a class, and we would create one of these to define a new site to index. Okay, and so, you know, we've seen this. These are some of the things that we can control when we add a site. We can, you know, we have to say where the URL is. This schema is a RediSearch schema. We'll look at what that means in a second. And then there's a bunch of different things that you can control. So this is the class we use to create a configuration. Let's look at some actual site definitions, okay? So here's the site definition for our production documentation site. So it's in this file. Let's see, what's this file? It's RediSearch sites Redis Labs, right? So we have a site configuration for our documentation site. It has a URL. That's the URL we were looking at a moment ago when I showed you how this actually works in production. And there's a bunch of different stuff that this app lets you configure. There are synonyms, right? And this can be important if you have like a technical product and you want to make it, you know, make your documentation or just make your website searchable, because a lot of times, you know, like take us, for example. We have a search project. If you go to our doc site and you type in search, we would really love you to see RediSearch. And also, if you mistype RediSearch, which actually I do all the time, so that's why I added that, we also want you to see RediSearch. So Synonym Groups, this is, you know, what, you know, we're looking at an application built, but synonyms are a feature of RediSearch that lets you control this, right? So all these search terms should be equivalent in the search index. If somebody types RediSearch, it should be the same as RediSearch and stuff like that. I've gotten a little aggressive with some of these because we really want you to find important stuff, like if you're looking for gears, you know, or JSON. If you're looking for Redis JSON, we want you to be able to find that. Anyway, that's what synonyms are. There's docs in RediSearch docs about how synonyms work in Redis server, in the actual server, and RediSearch the module. But for the application's purpose, some of these are about RediSearch, like synonyms. Some of them are about our application level stuff we've added, like changing the score of documents. We'll look at that in a minute. And some of them are like landing pages. Landing pages get into like the reality of search products. If you've ever worked on a search product before in production, you know, sometimes you really want somebody to land on a particular result first, right? You know the result somebody should get. Like if we were just looking at some stuff back here, if somebody types in, you know, RediSearch, it's great to show them accurate results, and we do want to show them accurate results. We also have a landing page for RediSearch. We want them to get that first. So this is the way that the app lets you make sure that for some terms, that people actually get to, you know, your page that you want them to get to first in the list of results. Anyway, that's enough about this. Let's go back to the documentation. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is all the same file. I put these synonym groups in this file. We have a file. I have a file for all the sites for Redis Labs, and you know, it's in our repository, so you can look at these. Okay, so you know, we could spend more time looking at this, but let's just copy and paste this into a new place. I actually already did this because I didn't want to have to do this live. I did it. And so let's say I copied and pasted that. I would create a new file. Oh, look, someone magically did it. It was me. I'm going to create a new file in this directory, right? In this sites directory. And this is the file for, you can put this anywhere, right? This is just where I put our site definitions. I put andrewbrookins.py. I see a comment in chat. I'm going to check that out real quick. Where can you find the slides? Good question. They will be available for download soon. Okay, going back to this. Okay, so yeah, so last night I copied and pasted this, but just for fun here, it's kind of weak. So let's just delete this and we'll do it live. All right, so this is the kind of thing you would do. Just gonna reuse one of these existing ones if you want to go fast. Everything is slowing down on my computer. Sorry about that. Okay, so you can call it whatever you want. You're gonna use this symbol later when you configure it. I'm gonna call it blog. Meaty, slow. You know what? Let's just use that code I had written since this is pretty slow. Also, if you don't want to type anything and you just want to try this out, I put all this in the training branch. So if you just want to, if you clone this repository and then you check out the training branch, you will have this code I'm about to, hey, that's not what I wanted. I didn't want a rocket ship. You will have the blog configuration for my blog already ready. One second. Hey, okay. Well, I was going to type it live, but for whatever reason, I'm getting a lot of lag. So anyway, if you just check out training, this is what you have. It's in the sites/andrewbrookins.py file. And yeah. So anyway, you get a site configuration, right? So you would do this for your own site too. I'm doing it for andrewbrookins.com because why not? But you create a site configuration. You can put it anywhere and put it in this file. You don't really need a lot of this stuff just to get started. You don't need the synonym groups. You don't need landing pages. You do need a URL. You do need allowed domains. You can just copy and paste the schema. This controls the RediSearch schema. It's really not that configurable unless you go into the code and actually change a lot of stuff. So just copy and paste this. There's scores, keep it the same. Validators, I'd keep them the same. Just copy and paste, deny. The only important, really important thing is content classes. So why is that important? This is the thing that, let's see. Oy, oy, oy. So when we were looking at the indexer, let me go back here. At some point, this code actually has to scrape the page itself, right? And find the HTML to put into the search index. And when it does that, if you have a hint about which element on the page contains the actual content for the page and isn't like a sidebar and stuff like that, you can give the site configuration object that hint with content classes, and it'll try one after the other. You might have a couple of these. Some sites have pages that load with, some pages load with posts, some pages load with, content or something like that. My site just has post elements. This is a tuple. So in Python, if you have a one element tuple, you do need to have a comma right here, which is kind of silly, but that's the case. So look on your site. I'm actually going to, just to show you this, I'm going to pull back my browser here and we'll go to my website and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is the website that we're indexing. It has some real cool content on it. And I only want to index this part, right? I only want to index, you know, the actual body of the document, or not the body in HTML. That's something special, but the article, let's call it, right? So on my site, I don't know if you can see, you can probably can't see this, but look at this blue line, right? This is the element, the div, or actually, well, whatever it is, the article that I want to index. So I'm giving, and it's got this class called post. I could do wrap, but that's more semantic, I think, for the layout. Post is like, this is the post. This is where everything is. So I'm going to use that. And I put it in here. It takes, you know, class or ID selector syntax, because it's using, what is it? It's using an XML parser, you know, to actually parse this element and try to index it. If it can't find this, or you didn't supply it, it's not going to break. It'll index the whole thing, like all the HTML, which isn't always what you want, but it should work fine. This is just a helper. Okay. So what we were trying to do here is index this site, right? So I've added this configuration. You can check out the branch, like I mentioned. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to force this thing to index this site. So as I mentioned, there's a schedule. So every hour, all the sites that you've configured. Oh wait, you know what I didn't show you is where this, where does this, you know, get used, this blog object? Just adding it isn't enough. You have to go to the app configuration file, which is stored here. It's in site search /config, right? Yeah, site search /config. And this is like the global app configuration for the whole app. There's not a lot of settings in here that are important, but what is important is the sites to index. And we change which sites we index based on whether you're in local development or in production. So what you will do for your site, you know, is you would add your site or my site to these dictionaries. The first you want to add is dev sites, because you're going to index it in development first, I'm sure. And it's just a dictionary of the URL to the site configuration. So here I've added, you know, I've imported blog, that object I created a second ago, and then I added it to this dictionary, and that's it, right? So after you've added it, you know, in an hour or 45 minutes or whatever, whenever the 60-minute mark comes back, then it will get indexed automatically. But if you don't want to wait, there's a command you can run to force this to index a particular page. And then I'm going to print and then run this indexing command. One second. All right, so this is the command you're going to run. By now, it's probably already indexed it, you know, on the hour mark or whatever. But it doesn't really give any output, I think, unless there's an error, you know, you see some kind of problem. But right now, you know, this command is running and it is indexing my site in the background. Okay, so that should be done. And let's see. Why don't we do this? I'm having trouble actually entering commands in. So what I'm going to do is switch to the front end, which I believe I've already configured to search against this site. Yeah, I have. Okay. So I'm going to switch over to the front end. We're going to do this in the next stage, but I need to test this out just so we know that it worked, right? So I'm going to switch to the front end, and this is this file. We'll look more at this in a minute, but this is this file that runs. You know what? I'm going to have to be able to run commands to actually get this to work too. Oh, hilarious. Okay, one second.
A few moments later.
If you were following along and also managed to index the site, that's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to Redis and just see if the index was added in with RediSearch, because if it was added, then the index worked. So that's all I'll check on, and then we'll go back to the checklist. And one of the next items is to use curl, get a search API request, and we'll see if that worked. So what have we done? We created a site configuration, and we reused the schema from one of the other sites and just sort of changed it. We added the URLs. We just copied over some of the other stuff. We ran the indexing job. We had a very long and fruitful, I'm sure, break when you got some time to actually try this yourself. I'm going to start the app again, and then I will also Docker isn't running. That's cool. Once I start the app, Redis will be running. So when I say start the app, like start all the containers for the project, one of the containers is Redis, and then we'll be able to connect to it normally. And then we can check the list of search indexes in RediSearch. Docker still starting. Docker's such a beast. No containers are running. Okay. So this is just like I said before, an alias to Docker Compose. So DC is Docker Compose up. Cool. Sometimes the Docker client doesn't know that Docker is there yet, if it's just started up recently. Sometimes it just never knows. But we will get Redis running, and then we're going to connect to it. So never you fear. That is going to happen. Okay, so here's my project, and I'm going to try Docker Compose up again. And this time, it's going to work 100%. No? Crazy. Okay. Well, gosh. Let's try a couple things. Keep actually exiting that, but I don't really want to exit it completely. It's like terminate. Okay. I thought, oh, maybe I'll just try what WSL for this because it works so well. Which, you know, hey, okay. So what I'm doing is just like reconnecting the pieces so that Docker, my Docker client can see Docker, the server. Okay. Once that's true, we should be able to do things like get a process list. Of course, it can't see Docker. Sweet. Okay. It knows about my project. Cool. But if we can't connect to Docker, then it's going to be hard for us to connect to Redis. Right. Gosh. Let's see if we can just start it with Docker's front end here so we can get in and test this out. So let's stop this one. That's not, oh, wow. Goodness. Why not? Welcome new people who have joined. I'm just restarting Docker so that we can actually connect to our Redis container that we created. And then once we can get to our container, we're going to check to see that there's a search index for andrewbrookins.com, which is the site that we added as a site configuration. It's always exciting when things don't work exactly right. I just am confused about that. Okay, gosh. Well, what can you even say, really, right? What can you even say about that? Okay, let's get back to the checklist. If you ever used Docker before, you know that everything breaking catastrophically is something that just happens on Wednesday sometimes. We added a site configuration. We ran the index job. Let's take another quick break so that I can fix Docker. And then we're going to look at the list of indexes in Redis and see that we have a new index for this site. So one sec. So you can take a break now, or you can just keep watching as I frantically try to get Docker to work again. If you'd like, I'm going to actually Google. I'm going to Google an error, which is is something that people do in real life. Oh, interesting. Let's see if this is doing it. Okay. Oh boy. I'm going to go in here and mess with the settings. Normally you can uncheck this. Man, Christian, you're legit. You're legit. That's all I can say, Christian. Christian has been present for this meeting despite just repeated technical failures. And if I had a bar of chocolate, I would, virtually send it to you, Christian. Okay. All right, I'm going to shut everything down and then I'm going to turn it back on. So let's turn back Docker. Okay, Docker claims it's working. Oh, it's starting. Okay, fine. Don't mind me, Docker. I just need to actually use Docker right now. It's not important. Okay, claims that it's running. All right, great. Let's try to use the Docker client. Oh, thank goodness. Wow. What can I say? It actually connected. That's great. Okay, let's bring up these containers. Then we're going to get into one of them. This project uses the append-only file to write state out from Redis. So when once we've indexed something, you can come back. Actually, you can see sometimes it's a little bit of an issue with this development setup because Redis has to reload the data from the indexes. But that's not a problem for us right now. Okay. Redis should be up. So let's try to connect to it. We're going to connect through Redis CLI. And let me make this bigger so you can see it. This project, normally when you run a database like Redis in a container, with Docker, you can't connect to it from your local host unless you set up a port mapping in Docker Compose or with raw Docker commands, which we've done here. So we can connect to Redis. Port is normally 6379, but it's 16379 in this project when you want to connect to it. And that's to avoid stomping on Redis that you might be running on your computer. We should be able to connect to it. We can give it the password on the command line since it's a simple dev password. Well, let's take a look at the state of this database. It's got a bunch of stuff in it. It has a bunch of the hashes that we created while indexing, and I'm going to look at the list of indexes. We create one index each time we run, and then we, in normal operation, remove, the older one and basically switch it out. There's an alias. That's a little deep right now, but the important part here is that this, right? There is an index for my website. That's what we wanted to achieve. And I'll just do let's do a quick search on that index just to see if there's anything in it. There's other ways to do this, but this is the most dramatic. If you just want to see, is there really anything in here? That's weird, but I just saw that. Okay, let's check the list again. Maybe we just deleted that old one or something. Okay, there is an index. There we go. Okay, so this is a glorious moment. You've waited so long to see it, and we have some stuff in the index for this random website that we just indexed, that we just added. So at this point, we can switch to configuring a front end component to see what this looks like, on a front end. So not just me poking around in the back end. We can do a couple things actually. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to use curl. So there's a search API. You obviously don't have to connect to Redis and do the search yourself. There's a search API that comes with this app that lets you query, and then there's a front end component that uses the search API. So we'll test this at a couple different levels. We'll test it with curl, and then we'll test it with the front end. to see what search results actually look like for users. Okay. But before I do any of that, I'm going to return again to the checklist. It's just so important now, the checklist. Let's make sure it's up to date. We ran the index job. We took an extraordinarily long break, a couple of them. Let's now try some curl. Let's try some curl. So let's see. The app is running at localhost :8080. And the path to do a search, this is the search API. The path to do a search is /search. Then you pass the Q query parameter and then your search query. So I'm going to search for Vim. And the other, interesting stuff here, let's see. There's a few different query parameters you can use in the search API, but the most important one for this test is the site to search, because this app can index multiple sites. And when it does, you need to specify the site that you want to search for a particular query. So we're going to search andrewbrookins.com, and we're going to search it for the search term Vim. I'm going to pass the output of this command to JQ, because JQ is a command line tool that sort of prettily formats JavaScript or JSON output. And this is what it looks like. So let me just scroll back here. Okay. So we ran our command, and then we've got this output. I write about Vim a lot, or have over the years. So we see a lot of different results. And this is what it looks like. So something to note about this actually is, let's see, where's a good example of this? Well, this is probably the best example. So something to note about how the search engine works is when we index, we don't just index a page at a time. We index each section of a page. So if a page has multiple H2s, so if it has subheaders, we break it apart into pieces and index them as pieces. And that lets us return a search result from deep inside a page. This is an example, this is a blog, which is what it is. And, you can see it found this particular hit on the section downsides of this review of PyCharm from many years ago. When you're indexing a structured site with deep, information like documentation, then this becomes more useful, because all of a sudden, you can show a hit from, the Python clients page from the connection pool section, and that's where the hit, might be. So what this is showing us, though, is that we've got the site index and it's showing up in our search API. And this is what the search API looks like. You get back a URL, a body, the hierarchy. On my site, this blog doesn't matter because there really isn't a hierarchy, but this is the thing where if there's multiple levels, so you can take a look at this. So right, this page is on andrewbrookins.com/tech. This isn't a real page. This is a 404. So the indexing just ignores this. But if this was a page, if there was a landing page at tech that had HTML and properly loaded, then we would get a hierarchy that started with andrewbrookins.com/tech. Or actually, it would be the title of that page first. It would be like technology. And then the next level would be Vim for Thunderbird. Wow, that's a really old post I wrote like many years ago. Okay. So anyway, that's just a little bit about what we're seeing here. We're seeing page results and section results. Sections have a section title. If there's no section title, then it is a page. In the index, it's a little bit different than that, but that's what the API looks like. Now, let's see, what else can we look at? We looked at the response objects. We looked at curl, and I'm just going to check those off, make sure we did them. I'm not going to give you more time for a hands-on because I think we've had enough time for hands-on. You can watch this or review this information later and try curling yourself, doing some curls. Let's actually switch to setting up the front end, and we'll see this in action. We'll see a real demo of searching, this web page we added with a front end component and how that looks. Okay, so like I mentioned before, right, we have a separate component for the front end, and I'll bring my browser back over here so you can see it. Let's see, where is that? Where'd you go, buddy? Okay, so here's the redis-sitesearch front-end repository. And you're just going to clone that if you want to set this up. This is a component. There's not a lot of docs yet on this, but this is the component that we use for our documentation site, right? It's this thing right here that drops down, and then when you search. So this is the thing. We're going to look at a demo of this. We're going to point it at this. We're going to point it at localhost and search my site now. So if you want to follow along, you can go to this repository. It's up here. You can see this URL, and then you would clone this. And then there's a couple of steps you need to take. So let's switch over to the front end repository and get this thing running finally. It's going to be so good. We're going to see search results. I'm 92% sure that there will not be another catastrophic technical failure that stops us from doing this demo. Let's open up a terminal and run some commands. So, rather than clone this all that stuff, because we're shorter on time now, I have a checkout already. It's at the training branch of that repository I just showed you. So you would clone that and you could check out the training branch. The training branch just has one tiny change here in this demo, and I'll show you what that means in a second. But this is what it looks like. These are the files you get. And, if we load them up in just this list of editors and stuff, you can see this in a tree form, which, is nice. So this is the front end repo, and this is the demo. So this also ships with the component itself. It's in this packages directory, and we could look at that, but it's not that interesting right now, but it's all in there. This is the code that powers the component. But what we want to do is we just want to go into the demo. The demo is a very simple page that loads the component and then lets you make searches so that you can see if it's working correctly when you're doing development. And the demo is this index.html site, very minimal stuff. It loads the package, the component. It loads the redis-sitesearch JavaScript component, and then it loads this custom search.js file. The search.js file uses the component to make the search, and you can, you're welcome to use this code to get started in adding this kind of component to your own site. All we need to do to test this out is change which site that this component is going to search. So by default, when you check this out, it's searching our doc site. So all I did is commented that out, and I added search site https andrewbrookins.com. This needs to match an actual index site with, that the API is indexing, the indexer is indexing for the search queries to work. This one is, we've tested it, we did a curl, we checked it, it's working. So what we're going to do is just build the files necessary to run the demo and then test the demo. So when you first check this out, you need to do npm install, and that'll do a bunch of things. And then there's two commands that you run once you've installed everything. While we're waiting for that, you can see the commands you need to run in a package.json file. It ships with just, helpful commands, right? They are build, watch. If you're actually doing development, if you clone this thing for your website and your company, and you want to change how this component works and you're doing development, you use watch. And there's also this demo thing, and that all that does is runs a Python HTTP server and serves the demo site so that you can visit it in your browser. And we're going to use both of those. Actually, I'm just going to use build. I think I'll use build to build the files, and then I'm going to use demo in another shell to run the demo HTTP server. I actually have everything installed, so maybe I should probably wait, I guess. We don't want to tempt the gods of any more than we already have, I think. As you can see, the Node.js ecosystem includes many different packages, and we use them all. We use every single one of them in this project. So when you do the npm install, there's a lot to install. We use this project called Lerna. This whole thing is forked from a public autocomplete component, which is really cool. So a lot of this code is just reused from that, including this stuff that uses Lerna. But once you do npm install, then Lerna bootstraps itself. And now we can do npm build, npm run build in one shell. That'll start building everything. And it outputs the files into, a couple different places, into the dist folder, which you can, in a minified form, which you can just copy into your page. And then it also copies them into the demo for us so that we don't have to do that. Then we run npm run demo. All right, so the demo is running on localhost at port 8000. And this is what it looks like. It's really simple. And it just has the search component. So I'm going to try searching for Vim, and this is what it looks like. So yeah, I write a lot about Python. I added this, we created this search component for structured sites that have sections, like I've talked about and alluded to over, the past couple hours or so. There's a way to add a default just title that shows up here. Normally sections appear here. Anyway, this is me searching my blog. And it's finding hits in the title, it's finding hits in the body. And here's one where it found a hit in a section of a page. So there's mixins in Python and Ruby compared. And the section is Appendix B, additional reading. And I clicked on it, and then I went there. So that's, that's how this works. Yeah, that's the front end working. Let's go back to our checklist. See it right here. All right, we did all this stuff. We did all that. You're welcome to try running that demo yourself and running through these commands. Okay, so I said if we had time, we would talk about how we deploy this, right? So we have historically deployed this on Google Cloud Platform, GCP. And I am so lazy that the deployment script is very simple. Let's see. The front end, I just deploy by adding to any site we want to use this on. So it's added into the doc site. The back end, we deploy with literally a shell script. So yeah, the shell script builds the images for these Docker images. It builds all the images that I want. It pushes them to Google Container Registry, and then it uses instance groups to do a what is it called? A rolling update, basically a rolling update of all the different instance groups to change them to use the new image. So all of that is pretty simple with GCP. I just have a very short shell script that does it. That's you can, anybody who's a production engineer knows, you can spend lots of time automating these things with Terraform and stuff like that. This is simple enough to get started for me that it worked just fine. So for now, this is still working. And yeah, in GCP, it gets kind of interesting actually in GCP because we want this thing to be very fast. And this is the staging example. The staging example only deploys to US West 1, but you can see here we deploy the app image, the worker image, and the scheduler image. They run separately because they scale separately. We only need one scheduler. Workers you can scale up to do concurrent processing if you're doing a lot of indexing. And then the app servers you can scale up to handle traffic. And you can, with GCP and most cloud providers, if you're doing this, you can do auto scaling if you want to spend a lot of money. So if there's like a spike from somebody benchmarking your site, it'll scale up, or real traffic also will scale up the app servers that run. Let me think. You can also deploy this with AWS. A simple way to do it with AWS is Lightsail. if you haven't used Lightsail, a new feature of AWS Lightsail is containers. Let's see, where is Lightsail's container page? Let's check it out. Lightsail containers. Yeah, check this out. I guess it's not that new. It was last year they launched this. This blog is not great for showing you exactly how this works. Here. Yeah, this is more like it. So in the AWS admin interface, you can now use Amazon Lightsail to start containers. So it used to be just VPCs. This is good for startups if you just want to play around with something. You can create this deployment based on an image. It's looking at Docker Hub. So you would push your image to Docker Hub and then set up a deployment. And where is it? Yeah, here we go. The image, you give it the image name and then start it. And so what you would do for this app is you would create multiple deployments, right? You would create one for your app servers, one for your worker, one for your scheduler, and you would point them at the individual images for each of those, and you could then scale them independently. If you're doing that, then we run Redis in GCP. So with AWS, you're doing Lightsail, then you would configure all those different deployments via environment variables. You have to do that anyway, right? So this whole app is configured via environment variables, and it doesn't really show that in here, I think, but part of the Lightsail containers deployment thing is you can add, oh, there it is. If you can see that, it's add environment variables. So you go in and add environment variables. One of the environment variables you're going to add is like where your Redis server is, right? So you need to point it at your production Redis host, give it the port and the password. And once you do that, then you can deploy it and you would be running this app in Amazon Lightsail. So that's my presentation. Flawless. If you're still here and have questions and you want to come and chat, come on over to Discord. It's the Redis Discord. You should be able to find us in the Discord server directory. So come on in. We have a RediSearch channel would be great for this kind of stuff. It's in modules and connectors. I hang out there a lot and talk about RediSearch and in other channels. So come on by into Discord and talk to us. It'll be great. All right. Thanks for joining us. This was fun. We hope to see you again soon.